Hello, family. This is African Esquire, and welcome to the Federation of African Liberation. We are a Pan-Africanist organization that seeks to unite the masses of African people throughout the diaspora and on the continent of Africa for the purposes of liberating our people. So if you're interested in joining our organization, you can follow the links down below. So today what I'm going to talk about is a very interesting story and a new development that has happened in the country of Venezuela. And although Venezuela is not a country that I would typically talk about, this is actually something that is very pertinent to African people, because this is something that has been attempted by different people on the continent of Africa but has not been achieved. And that is the country of Venezuela has decided to start a new currency, and the currency will be called the petro. And this currency, instead of being backed by nothing, as the US dollar essentially is, this currency is going to be backed by the natural resources of Venezuela. So I'm going to play a news story, a news clip, and if you could just watch that clip, and then I will be right back with my analysis of why this is pertinent to our people to understand.
We look to Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro made a major announcement in a bid to address the country's struggling economy and high rates of inflation. On Monday, Maduro announced the adoption of the petro, a digital currency tied to Venezuela's massive oil and mineral reserves.
I have incorporated into the Petro white paper, in the calculation of the formula for the establishment of its value, the support in gold, diamonds, iron, and aluminum, so our Petro was born armored with oil wealth and mining wealth.
The petro is supported by the concept that, unlike other cryptocurrencies, it has inherent value if backed by Venezuela's natural resources. In other words, it won't need to be mined the same way Bitcoin is, for example. Maduro's goal in introducing the petro is to sideline so-called money mafias in the country, which the state blames for driving inflation through the use of black market currency and resource trading. Venezuelans will now be allowed to make purchases with the petro rather than the dollar, and Venezuelan banks will use the digital currency as a unit of account. Maduro called the petro's adoption date, quote, historic.
The 6 most powerful exchanges in the world are here, and we will participate today in all the usability, tradability, and monetary work of the petro. So, Venezuela, 1 October 2018, historical date, born with its own technology, with its own effort, in a free and independent country, is the digital oil currency, the petro. Welcome, petro.
Now, why this is relevant to African people is because, first of all, the first thing that you should think about when we hear that the president of Venezuela is thinking of switching his currency over is that someone has already tried to do that, and that was Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi wanted to switch Libya, and not just Libya, but really he wanted all of Africa to go on the gold standard. And the reason is because Africa has plenty of gold. Africa is the most minerally wealthy continent. So if Africans were to go on the gold standard, the poorest continent would now become the richest continent, and that would completely change the power dynamics. So a lot of people say that it's not coincidental that Gaddafi, after trying to get this done, all of a sudden becomes an enemy of France, and France already had a relationship with Gaddafi previous to him doing this, and they had a favorable relationship with Gaddafi. In fact, I read that Gaddafi was actually trying to help the French president get reelected and actually visited France for the purpose of business deals. So he had a favorable relationship with Gaddafi, but yet, if the Nicolas Sarkozy did, yet as soon as he starts trying to change the currency in Libya, that completely changes things. He becomes a terrorist. He becomes someone who is a dictator, so someone who is evil, someone that the people have to be liberated from. And this supposedly was what caused the Obama administration, who were watching France do this for this reason, this supposedly motivated them to get involved because they seen that their interests could be intertwined also with the France's interests to stop this currency change from happening. So I'm going to read from a very kind of lengthy article, but I'm just going to read a few excerpts. This article was on Vice News, and the title is Libyan Oil, Gold and Gaddafi, the strange email that Cindy Blumenthal sent Hillary Clinton in 2011. 2 weeks after France began bombing Libya, in March of 2011, Hillary Clinton's old friend and advisor, Cindy Blumenthal, passed an intelligence memo that supposedly revealed France's true and quite unflattering motivations for toppling Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. While France's then president, Nicolas Sarkozy, publicly said that he wished to free the Libyan people from tyranny, Blumenthal's memo argues that he was driven by a cocktail of less lofty incentives, including a desire for Libyan oil and fear that Gaddafi secretly planned to use his vast supply of gold to displace France's primacy in the region. On April 2nd, 2011 memo that was titled France's Clients Q Gold, quotes, knowledgeable individuals with insider information about French President Nicolas Sarkozy's motivation for bombing Libya. The military campaign, the anonymous source says, was designed to quash plans by Gaddafi to use $7 billion in secret gold and silver to prop up a new African currency. The French worried that the move would undercut the currency by the French treasury, known as CFA francs, that was widely used in West Africa and acts as a strong linkage between France and many of its former colonies. After France's intelligence officials got wind of this secret plan, the Blumenthal memo reports, Sarkozy freaked out. This was one of the factors that influenced his decision to commit France to the attack on Libya. Though Blumenthal was not an employee of the State Department at the time that he passed on the gold conspiracy, Hillary Clinton clearly took his views seriously and sometimes even encouraged aides to put the information to use. Just 2 weeks before Blumenthal sent the Gaddafi gold memo, Clinton met with Sarkozy in France, where the president pressed her to back an air campaign in Libya. At the time, in justifying his enthusiasm for military intervention, Sarkozy said publicly that France had decided to assume its role before history to ward off a killing spree. The French military said he said was determined to defend any Libyans who wanted to liberate themselves from servitude. I'm going to take a brief moment just to pause. So Sarkozy, and many of you might know, he was quoted as saying that if France were to lose its hold in Africa, that France would cease to exist in significance. He was quoted as saying something of this nature. So he's very clear, we know, that if France loses influence in Africa, that France, what does France have? Africa is really all that France has left. And it's very interesting that he gives this reason, that the reason why he wants the U.S. to back France and Libya is to end a killing spree. And think about all the killing sprees that are going on around the world. Think about what's going on in not Saudi Arabia, the mass genocide that is going on. It's a Middle Eastern country. Y'all help me out. But there's a mass genocide going on in so many different countries. There's so much going on in different places in Yemen and all these places. And yet you are suddenly so motivated to intervene inside of this country because you want to stop a killing spree. And this shows very clearly that can't be the real motivation, because there's so many killing sprees going on. There's killing sprees going on right now in Cameroon. There's killing sprees going on in China, in North Korea, so many places. So why are you motivated by this killing spree? And mind you, this is a killing spree because really there's no evidence that Gaddafi was on a killing spree in Libya. But this is what the French president was saying. And so the question has to be, why? What makes this one different to you, Mr. President? If you're so concerned about human life, you should be consistently concerned about human life. You should be consistently worried whenever people are dying in mass numbers. And I promise you, if anyone was dying in Libya, I'm sure that there was some infighting, so I'm sure there was casualties. I promise that those casualties were nowhere close to the other killings and the other things going on in the Congo, things going on all over, not just Africa, but all over the world. I promise you, they were nowhere close to that. So you should always question someone's motivation when they are outraged at one type of killing or outraged at one type of person's brutal dictatorship, but they're not outraged by others. Because if they're not outraged universally, that means that they have a personal agenda. And that should be very clear just from the get-go. So to go on, the Blumenthal memo tells us a very different story than what the French president was saying. Aside from fears over the new Libyan-backed African currency, Blumenthal's sources reported to Clinton that Sarkozy was motivated by four primary concerns: Libyan oil, an opportunity to increase France's influence in Northern Africa, a global stage for French military to strut its stuff, and Sarkozy to improve his domestic standing. It's true that in the early spring of 2011, Sarkozy was headed into an election the following year with almost 70% of French citizens expressing disapproval of his job performance. Some say Sarkozy's decision to intervene as a desperate move to recover from the record popularity lows. Statistics published by Pollster TNS in February 2011 showed that 66% of the population supported French's military in Libya. So that should paint a picture of why what happened in Libya happened. Not only do you have the French government basically freaking out at the possibility of Muammar Gaddafi gaining influence in the side of the region and also changing the currency, because as was mentioned earlier in the article, the CFA franc is really one of the things that keeps France floating. It's the currency that is used in most of France's former colonies, and that currency allows them to also control the banks of these countries. And because they control the banks, they're able to control whether or not these national leaders can use their own currency, how they use it. They're able to regulate the currency. It gives them an unsurmountable amount of power, and the fact that more African people have not challenged the use of the CFA franc inside of these countries is really surprising, because this is a blatant showing of colonialism that has been done by the French government for decades on decades on decades, and there's no telling that they wanted to, well, we know they don't want it to stop. So the question is really going to be when we want it to stop. But it's interesting that you have Gaddafi, who is somewhat close to the other French former colonies, and he's proposing a new type of currency. And this would take you away from the CFA franc and actually say, okay, well, you have gold, don't you? Don't you have natural mineral resources? Well, that's going to be the new backing of the currency. Now, when we say backing of the currency, just to break this down a little further, why would it be so important for Africa to back its currency on the natural resources like the Venezuela president is doing, rather than backing their currency on, say, the U.S. dollar? They say that a lot of countries right now are freaking out about the U.S. dollar for a number of reasons, because it just looks like, as far as the debt relationship with the U.S. dollar, that it's not the most profitable currency. And the reason why the U.S. dollar is so flimsy is because while other countries have backed their currency by, say, gold, the United States dollar is actually not backed by anything. It's called fiat currency, fiat money. And that is basically meaning that the reason why we see a dollar as having value is because we all agree that it has value. There's no reason for it to have value. It's just a piece of paper, but because we all agree, that's why it has value. There's no gold backing it up. So whenever you have a dollar, it doesn't represent anything. It only represents this piece of paper. And when you have fiat currency, the U.S. dollar, which is a type of fiat currency, is not just going to be backed on, us agreeing on it. It's also backed on U.S. debt. So when the United States debt increases to a significant rate, that makes the currency less and less stable. So, of course, the more and more countries depend on that type of currency, if the currency actually if the debt in the United States actually does not get better and it doesn't show any signs of getting better, then you basing your economy on this currency is a probable effect of basically completely displacing your economic livability and completely defacing your economy. So it's very clear why other people are scattering basically to find some other means of trading and some other means of currency. So this is something to consider. This is something to talk about. Is while Venezuela is doing this, and I say keep an eye on what's going on in Venezuela. I'm saying that again, keep an eye on Venezuela, because just about every time that a country has tried to switch away and change their currency like this, that leader has ended up assassinated. So again, we said Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein. Every time that leaders try to do this, there's ramifications not only for that country doing it, but if other countries follow suit. So, we should be very, very observant of what's going on in Venezuela, whether or not there are coups that are going to be instigated. We know that Trump was just talking about going into Venezuela to basically try to save the people. And I honestly believe that this is why, because he probably received an intelligence memo saying that, hey, this is what's going on in Venezuela. He's going to be announcing this any day now. And of course, the answer is not to allow this to happen, but the answer is to stop the effort, stop it before it becomes public, preferably. But regardless, try to stop it and stop other people from following suit. So I would say definitely observe Venezuela, and we actually have to have real conversations about the different currencies that we're using as African people, wherever you are, whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're in the United States, whether you're on the continent of Africa. Why are we using these currencies? Because when you look at the CFA franc, for example, what benefit is there of using this currency from a country that has no mineral resources? None. France has nothing, and they depend on you to live. And so you're using this currency that does not have any benefit to you and only benefits them. We have to start questioning these things. And y'all, I'm by no means an economist, but and I welcome more economists to give more thorough analysis. But generally speaking, we have to start questioning these policies and these things that we're doing, and we're doing them automatically. Because I'll tell you, until I started researching this stuff, I didn't know any of this. I didn't know, I knew about Gaddafi and the gold standard, but I didn't know that the U.S. currency is really backed on nothing. And so, these are things for us to research. These are things for us to consider. These are things for us to understand that if the dollar really is going down, that all of us will be going down with it. And when black people go down and black people are affected, we are always the most affected of everyone. Anytime there's ever been a depression, every time there's ever been an economic collapse globally, African people, whether you're in the U.S. or whether you're in Africa or wherever, we are always the ones to have the most hardship, because we already are in the position of servitude. We are already in the position of being exploited. So understand that we have to be very careful about planning our future, and we have to be thinking 10, 15 years into the future to anticipate what could happen. And regardless of, what could happen or what might happen, we have to also focus on what we can do to get ourselves out of this position that we are in, because there's no reason for us not to have a currency like the one in Venezuela. There's no reason for us not to have a currency that will actually be to our benefit and not to our detriment. So this is all I have to say about this. And if you could just like, comment, and tell me your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this new bold move by the Venezuela president? Should we be worried for him? And what could this possibly mean for the African continent should African leaders wake up? And I want to say African leaders, because African leaders are not going to wake up. Should the African people wake up and realize what's going on, and take definitive action to displace the leaders who are making decisions on their behalf? Should they wake up to the situations that are going on, to the choices that have been made, that have passed down from colonialism, to follow certain currencies without questioning them? When they wake up from that, what are going to be the implications, and what could happen to better the future of African people all around the world? So that's what I had today, and I will see you all in another video.